How to silently destroying your dreams by living a burning out life. You don't realize it, but your dreams are dying quietly, not because you failed, but because you got too exhausted to care. It starts subtly. You begin calling exhaustion commitment, numbness, discipline, and anxiety motivation. You tell yourself you're fine, that this is what success looks like. Yet something inside you is slowly collapsing. The brain keeps firing signals of distress. Cortisol floods your body, and dopamine, once the spark of inspiration, becomes a drug you chase just to feel alive for another day. You wake up tired, go to sleep restless, and call it ambition. You repeat tasks that no longer inspire you, scrolling through empty routines that once carried meaning. Every day becomes a negotiation between your body begging for rest and your mind terrified of slowing down. You've been conditioned to believe that stillness means failure, that rest means weakness. But the truth is, you're not tired. You're disconnected. Burnout doesn't scream. It whispers. It tells you to push through just one more day, one more project, one more sacrifice. You comply because stopping feels dangerous, as if your worth would evaporate if you stood still. But deep inside, your nervous system knows the truth. Chronic stress reshapes the architecture of your brain, reducing its ability to feel joy, focus deeply, or dream vividly. Your prefrontal cortex, the part that imagines the future, begins to dim. You don't lose your dreams all at once. You lose them every time you say, "I'm fine," when you're not. Andrew Huberman explains that constant overstimulation numbs the brain's reward circuits, making every achievement feel hollow. Joe Dispenza would call it the body becoming addicted to stress. You no longer chase purpose. You chase the chemical hit of survival. Meanwhile, your inner fire, the one that once guided your choices, burns out quietly under the weight of endless doing. Descartes once said, "The preservation of health should be the first study of one who is wise." But wisdom has been replaced by performance. We no longer listen to the body's messages. We medicate them, silence them, schedule them away. You are not just burning out. You are becoming a shadow of the person you were meant to be. Every time you ignore your exhaustion, you teach your brain that your needs don't matter. Every time you postpone peace, you feed the illusion that success is earned through suffering. Ask yourself, when did you start surviving instead of living? When did having it together become more important than being together within yourself? The truth is, burnout doesn't destroy dreams through chaos. It kills them with order, with perfectly planned days that leave no room for wonder. You don't notice the moment it happens, but one day, you realize that your goals don't excite you anymore. Your reflection looks alive, but your mind feels distant, detached. That's when the silent destruction begins. Your burnout isn't laziness. It's the body's last attempt to save you from yourself. The exhaustion is not the problem. It's the message. And if you dare to listen, you might realize that your burnout isn't the end. It's the beginning of remembering what truly matters. The life that exists beyond performance, beyond the noise, beyond the illusion of "I'm just tired." When busyness becomes identity. We live in a world that worships movement. To pause is to fall behind. To rest is to risk being forgotten. You've been trained to measure your worth, not by who you are, but by how much you produce. Every hour is a currency, every silence a liability. Slowly, without noticing, you begin to build your own prison, a schedule so full that it leaves no space for your soul to breathe. Busyness becomes a disguise, a socially accepted form of escape. You hide your fears beneath deadlines, your insecurities beneath achievements. Daniel Goleman calls this state emotional blindness, the inability to perceive what's happening within yourself because you're constantly scanning the external world for validation. You say yes to everything because saying no feels selfish. You fill your time because stillness feels dangerous. But this constant doing is not living. It's avoidance dressed as ambition. Modern neuroscience shows that when the brain is perpetually overstimulated, it stops distinguishing between necessary and unnecessary stress. The same circuits that once lit up for excitement now activate for anxiety. You begin to live in what Andrew Huberman describes as a state of hypervigilance, a survival loop where the body never shuts off. The adrenaline feels like energy, but it's deception. It's the body burning through reserves it no longer has. The philosopher Aristotle defined the good life as eudaimonia, a state of deep fulfillment that arises not from constant action, but from right action aligned with purpose. Yet in our culture, this wisdom has been replaced by grind mentality. We confuse movement with meaning, effort with essence. You're not chasing dreams anymore. You're chasing distractions that look like progress. The tragic irony is that the more you do, the less you feel. The more you achieve, the less you connect. It's easy to mistake exhaustion for purpose because both can make you feel alive, one through passion, the other through pain. But here's the difference. Purpose replenishes you, while busyness drains you. When you're driven by purpose, you expand. When you're driven by fear, you shrink. Descartes would say that true awareness comes from distinguishing what is clear and what is confused. Yet many live in confusion, mistaking chaos for productivity, mistaking noise for growth. Look closely at your days. Notice how silence feels unbearable, how you reach for your phone before you reach for your thoughts. That's not discipline, that's dependency. You've outsourced your sense of self to the rhythm of urgency. Your mind no longer belongs to you. It belongs to your notifications, your tasks, your fears of irrelevance. The Stoics taught that freedom isn't found in doing more, but in needing less. Marcus Aurelius warned against being busy without purpose, reminding us that a crowded life often hides an empty mind. The question is, who are you without the rush? Can you still recognize yourself in the quiet? Because until you do, your busyness will continue to imprison you. You'll keep mistaking pressure for meaning, movement for life, and your dreams, the real ones, will remain locked behind the walls you built in the name of success. When dopamine becomes your enemy, there's a hidden cost to the constant chase for progress. Your brain chemistry. Every time you achieve something, post something, or even anticipate a notification, your brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter of reward and motivation. It's supposed to guide you toward meaningful goals, but in a burned-out life, it becomes a trap. You stop pursuing purpose and start chasing the next spike, the next hit, the next small moment of validation that feels like life, but isn't. Andrew Huberman explains that the brain's dopamine system works on prediction, not on the reward itself, but on the expectation of reward. The problem begins when your life becomes a loop of constant pursuit without satisfaction. You wake up, scroll for stimulation, work endlessly, and feel nothing. Each microdose of pleasure rewires your brain to seek more of the same. Shorter cycles, faster hits, less meaning. Over time, the brain adapts. What once made you excited now barely moves you. It's not that you've lost ambition, it's that your reward system has burned out. This is why you can hit a milestone and feel nothing. The chemical pathway that used to signal joy is now dulled by overstimulation. It's like trying to light a match in a storm. The spark appears, but it doesn't last. The modern world keeps you in this storm. Endless inputs, no stillness, no recovery. Joe Dispenza calls this addiction to the familiar emotions of stress. You're not addicted to achievement. You're addicted to the state of chasing. Your body expects tension. Your mind demands more noise. And yet, in this storm, your dreams suffocate. Dopamine was meant to serve vision, to push you toward growth, creativity, purpose. But when you overstimulate it, it no longer serves you. It enslaves you. You confuse exhaustion for effort, distraction for drive. The more you push, the more your nervous system collapses under the illusion of progress. Neuroscientifically, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning, focus, and decision-making, starts to lose control over your limbic system, the emotional center. The result is impulsive living, always doing, never being. You lose the capacity to prioritize, to say no, to discern what actually matters. You're not lazy, you're neurologically hijacked. Descartes believed that clarity of thought was the foundation of existence. But how can you think clearly when your biology is screaming for rest? Your brain isn't failing you, it's protecting you. Exhaustion is not weakness. It's a biological boundary being crossed repeatedly. The fatigue you feel is your nervous system begging for recalibration. So what's the way out? It begins with learning to pause, not as an escape, but as a reset. When you allow stillness, you allow dopamine to stabilize. You teach your brain to find reward in depth, not in speed. Huberman calls it dopamine layering, finding joy in effort itself, not only in the outcome. Because once you stop chasing noise, you start hearing your mind again. In silence, the brain heals. In rest, focus returns. And in that moment of calm, the chemical chaos begins to settle, revealing something deeper than dopamine ever could. Peace, clarity, and the strength to dream again. How numbness disguises as strength. There comes a point where you no longer feel the highs or the lows. You stop celebrating victories and stop grieving losses. Everything becomes flat, predictable, controlled. On the outside, you seem composed, productive, calm, stable, but inside, you've gone dark. That's not peace. That's emotional shutdown. The absence of feeling is not mastery. It's the mind's emergency brake after years of overload. When the nervous system is constantly under pressure, the brain begins to protect itself through dissociation. It starts filtering emotion as noise because the system can't process one more wave of stress. What was once joy becomes neutrality. What was once sadness becomes silence. Andrew Huberman explains that chronic stress suppresses the brain's limbic response, dulling the very circuits that make us human. The ability to connect, empathize, and feel meaning. You tell yourself this numbness is resilience. You say, I've learned to handle things. But the truth is, you've learned to not feel things. You've built a shield so thick that not even joy can penetrate it anymore. Daniel Goleman describes this as emotional blindness, a state where awareness of the inner world is replaced by a fixation on performance. You no longer ask, how do I feel? But rather, what needs to be done? Descartes sought to separate mind from body, but modern neuroscience shows they were never apart. Your body still feels what your mind denies. The tightness in your chest, the shallow breath, the headaches, they are emotions trying to find their way out. Joe Dispenza would say that every suppressed emotion becomes stored energy, shaping the body's chemistry and the mind's behavior. You can silence emotion, but not without consequence. The more you suppress, the more disconnected you become from your intuition, creativity, and spiritual depth. The Stoics never taught emotional denial. They taught emotional direction. Marcus Aurelius faced chaos not by numbing himself, but by mastering his perception of it. There's a difference between calm and indifference. Calm requires presence, indifference requires distance. And you've been choosing distance because feeling again terrifies you. It would mean acknowledging how long you've been running on empty. This is the great paradox of burnout. You spend years striving for control, only to realize that control costs you your humanity. You stop feeling sadness to avoid pain, but in doing so, you also lose joy, curiosity, and love. Emotional numbness doesn't make you stronger, it makes you smaller. You are not broken for feeling too much. You are human. The path back isn't through perfection, but through reconnection. To feel again is not a setback, it's a return. And the moment you stop fearing your emotions, you begin to heal the fracture between who you've become and who you truly are. When routine replaces meaning, you tell yourself you've found balance. a steady rhythm that keeps your life under control. You wake up at the same time, follow the same routines, tick off the same boxes. Everything feels stable, but deep inside, you sense something missing, the pulse of aliveness. The truth is, your structure isn't freedom. It's a cage built with good intentions. You've replaced chaos with predictability, but also replaced meaning with repetition. Control feels safe because unpredictability once hurt you. Somewhere in the past, uncertainty led to pain, a failure, a loss, a betrayal. So you learned to tighten every corner of your existence. You began confusing peace with predictability, safety with sameness. Aristotle said that virtue lies in the balance between excess and deficiency, but control rarely balances. It suffocates. You start managing life instead of living it. You minimize risk, but also wonder. You schedule everything, but feel nothing. The Stoics taught discipline, not rigidity. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that routine without reflection becomes servitude. Yet that's where many find themselves, living a sequence of tasks that promise purpose but deliver emptiness. Every day blends into the next, and what was once a system of order becomes an anesthetic against growth. Descartes warned against mistaking clarity for certainty. One is truth, the other is fear wearing a mask of logic. Neuroscience confirms what philosophy has always known. When life becomes too predictable, the brain's reward system shuts down. The prefrontal cortex stops releasing the small bursts of dopamine that come from novelty and exploration. Your neurons stop learning. Your emotional world stops expanding. The same routine that once stabilized you now dulls your vitality. You begin existing in psychological autopilot, not because you're lazy, but because your brain has stopped seeing life as something new. This illusion of control offers comfort, but demands a heavy price. It keeps you from surprise, spontaneity, and even love. You become efficient, but empty, productive, but passionless. You've mastered your schedule, but lost touch with your soul. Andrew Huberman notes that the human brain thrives on mild unpredictability. It fuels attention, learning, and joy. Without it, you become a machine of repetition, functioning without presence. Joe Dispenza would say that when you live by routine, you stop creating and start memorizing. Every day becomes a copy of yesterday, and the body, addicted to familiarity, resists change even when the mind begs for more. This is how burnout hides inside control. You tell yourself you're managing everything, but in truth, you're avoiding the unknown. And the unknown is where your next version lives. So ask yourself, when was the last time you did something not because you had to, but because your spirit moved you? When was the last time you felt time dissolve because you were lost in curiosity? Control feels like safety, but real life, the kind that wakes the soul, begins beyond it. Meaning doesn't live in repetition, it lives in renewal. And renewal only comes when you're brave enough to let go. When the body speaks what the mind denies. There is a moment when your body stops asking and starts warning. At first it whispers, a headache, a restless night, a racing pulse before an email. You ignore it, convincing yourself it's temporary. But the whispers grow louder. Fatigue becomes your baseline. Sleep no longer restores you. Your chest tightens for no reason. Your digestion falters, and your mind blames everything but the truth. Your body is speaking the language your mind refuses to hear. For years, you've trained yourself to override the signals of fatigue, to numb discomfort with caffeine, ambition, or denial. But the body keeps score. Every suppressed emotion, every ignored boundary, every sleepless night is recorded in the silent biology of your cells. Joe Dispenza describes it as the body becoming the unconscious mind, repeating emotional patterns that your intellect tries to outthink. You can't reason your way out of exhaustion, because it's not mental anymore. It's physical truth manifesting as consequence. The physiology of burnout is brutal. Cortisol, the stress hormone, floods your system, until it dulls your sensitivity to dopamine and serotonin. Your immune system weakens, your memory fades. Andrew Huberman explains that chronic stress disrupts the communication between your prefrontal cortex and amygdala, meaning logic loses control over fear. You stop thinking clearly and start reacting instinctively. It's no longer you steering life, it's survival doing it for you. This is the breaking point, when the very body that carried your ambition begins to rebel. You tell yourself you're fine, because the alternative terrifies you. Slowing down feels like surrender. But every migraine, every panic spike, every morning you can't get out of bed is not failure. It's your body begging for alignment. The same system that once powered your drive is now protecting your soul from collapse. Philosophically, Descartes sought separation, the mind as pure reason, the body as machine. But modern neuroscience proves the opposite. Mind and body are a single intelligence. When one suffers, both deteriorate. What you call burnout is not weakness. It's miscommunication between two parts of the same self. Your intellect pushes forward, but your biology refuses to follow. That tension is the crack where transformation begins. Marcus Aurelius wrote that, "What stands in the way becomes the way." The breaking point, then, is not destruction, it's revelation. It's the body forcing you to listen. Because underneath all the noise, your biology doesn't want productivity. It wants presence. It doesn't crave achievement. It craves coherence. And once you realize that exhaustion is not your enemy, but your messenger, you stop fighting your body and start understanding it. When you begin to rest, not as escape, but as respect, something profound happens. The heart slows, the mind clears, dopamine stabilizes, the system starts repairing itself, neuron by neuron, breath by breath. You stop existing in survival and start remembering what it feels like to be alive. The breaking point is not the end. It's your beginning. The moment your body and mind finally decide to speak the same language again. The moment you stop dreaming. It doesn't happen in a single instant. There's no dramatic collapse, no obvious signal that something sacred inside you has gone quiet. It happens quietly, subtly, almost politely. One morning you realize your dreams no longer excite you. The goals you once chased now feel heavy, distant, irrelevant. You keep moving, not because you're inspired, but because you don't know what else to do. That's the moment of silent surrender, when life continues on the outside, but the inner world stops expanding. You stop imagining because imagination hurts. To dream again would mean to hope again, and hope requires energy you no longer have. So you convince yourself that comfort is enough, that stability is maturity, that passion is a childish luxury. But beneath that narrative lies a quiet grief, the mourning of the person you were supposed to become. The human spirit doesn't die in tragedy. It dies in monotony, in the slow erosion of meaning disguised as order. Jordan B. Peterson often says that meaning is what rescues us from suffering. Without it, pain becomes chaos, and chaos becomes despair. When you lose your dreams, you lose the architecture of direction, the map that gives your suffering purpose. You wake up without a why, and the mind, deprived of direction, begins to decay into apathy. This isn't depression in its dramatic form. It's a subtler, more dangerous state, emotional paralysis that looks like peace, but feels like emptiness. Philosophically, Descartes sought certainty through doubt. He stripped everything away until only one truth remained. I think, therefore, I am. But what happens when the thoughts themselves lose meaning? When your existence becomes mechanical thought without wonder? That's when the self fractures. You're living, but you're no longer becoming. You're existing within boundaries that used to protect you, but now confine you. The Stoics understood this state as acedia, a spiritual fatigue, the sense that life has lost its vitality. Marcus Aurelius faced it through duty, reminding himself that even the smallest act done with intention can restore the flame of purpose. Because meaning isn't found, it's remembered. And every time you reconnect with what matters, even briefly, the soul begins to stir again. Neuroscience explains this phenomenon too. When you stop imagining the future, the brain's prefrontal cortex, the seat of vision and purpose, becomes underactive. The neural networks responsible for creativity, anticipation, and motivation begin to shut down. You literally lose the ability to see beyond the present. But when you reintroduce imagination, when you dare to visualize again, those circuits reignite. The chemistry of hope returns. This is why dreams are not optional. They're biological. They're the mind's blueprint for growth, the emotional compass that keeps you aligned with meaning. Without them, your dopamine system falls into stagnation, your energy declines, and your inner voice fades into static. But surrender, though silent, can also be reversed. The same way you drifted away from your dreams, you can drift back, one thought at a time, one intention at a time. You don't need a miracle. You need a reason. And once you rediscover that reason, however small, your body, mind, and spirit begin to conspire toward life again. You haven't lost your dreams. You've only stopped listening. And the moment you dare to listen again, you'll hear it. That faint, steady pulse that never stopped beating beneath the noise. Hearing the whisper beneath the noise. The awakening doesn't arrive with thunder. It comes in silence, often when you've run out of distractions, when even your exhaustion feels empty. It begins with a whisper, so faint you almost miss it. A thought, a memory, a fleeting question. What happened to me? That's the first sign of life returning. Self-awareness emerging from the ruins of routine. The same awareness you've been avoiding now calls you home. At first it feels strange. The stillness you used to fear begins to feel different, not threatening, but necessary. You start noticing small details again. The texture of air in the morning, the weight of your breath, the quiet rhythm of your own heart. Andrew Huberman explains that when the parasympathetic system finally activates after prolonged stress, the body starts repairing itself. The noise of adrenaline fades, the storm of cortisol recedes, and in that calm, your consciousness finds space to breathe. You begin to realize that silence was never the enemy. It was the teacher you kept ignoring. Inside that quiet, clarity starts forming. You see how much of your life was built on reaction instead of intention. You see how much energy you've spent performing rather than existing. This awareness is uncomfortable at first because it exposes how far you've drifted. But discomfort is the birthplace of truth. Descartes would call this the moment of radical doubt, when you finally question everything you thought was certain, not to destroy it, but to rediscover what's real. The Stoics called it ataraxia, tranquility of the soul. Not the absence of chaos, but mastery within it. Marcus Aurelius didn't seek quiet in the world. He found it within the noise of Rome, in the battlefield of thought. That's the essence of awakening. Not escaping life, but reclaiming it. You don't need to disappear from the world. You need to return to yourself within it. Neuroscience aligns with this ancient truth. When the mind enters states of mindful awareness, the brain's default mode network, the part that loops through worry, memory, and ego, begins to quiet down. Dopamine stabilizes, serotonin rises, neural connectivity improves. Your perception literally changes. What once felt overwhelming now feels manageable. What once felt meaningless begins to glow with subtle beauty. And then, something profound happens. You begin to hear the whisper again, stronger this time. It's not external. It's the voice of your own consciousness, unfiltered by stress. It tells you what you've always known but forgotten, that you were never meant to survive in silence, but to create from it. That purpose doesn't come from noise. It's born in stillness, shaped in focus, and expressed in action. Joe Dispenza says that when you observe yourself without judgment, You enter the quantum field of change, the state where old neural patterns begin to dissolve. That's exactly what this awakening is, your biology catching up with your soul. You start releasing the old stories, the old fears, the old urgency. You start remembering what joy feels like, not the loud kind, but the deep kind that hums quietly beneath peace. And as this awareness expands, a realization surfaces, the most important one yet. Nothing outside you needs to change for you to begin again. The shift happens within, in the silence that was once unbearable and is now sacred. The noise hasn't disappeared. It's simply lost its power to define you. You've learned to hear the whisper beneath it, and that whisper is you, rebuilding from within. After the silence comes something softer but far more powerful: direction. Not the external kind, measured in goals or metrics, but an inner alignment, quiet yet certain. You begin to sense that purpose isn't something you find, it's something you remember. It was never lost, only buried beneath the noise of expectations, fears, and endless striving. And now, as the fog lifts, you begin to feel it again. That subtle pull toward meaning, the magnetic truth that tells you were made for more than survival. At this stage, you no longer chase intensity. You start craving depth. You begin to see that a meaningful life isn't built through grand gestures, but through coherence. The alignment between what you think, what you feel, and what you do. Aristotle called it telos, the ultimate purpose that gives shape to your existence. When your actions reflect your inner truth, energy flows naturally. There's no longer friction between your heart and your habits. You stop trying to prove and start learning to be. Neuroscience confirms what ancient philosophy intuited. When your goals align with your core values, your brain releases a balanced pattern of dopamine, not in spikes, but in rhythm. Andrew Huberman explains that sustainable motivation emerges not from novelty, but from consistency linked to meaning. The reward becomes the journey itself. You find satisfaction not at the end of your effort, but within it. This rediscovery of purpose also transforms your emotional world. Daniel Goleman teaches that emotional intelligence thrives when intention and awareness coexist. You stop reacting to life and start responding to it. Every challenge becomes information. Every setback becomes feedback. Instead of seeing obstacles as punishment, you begin to see them as refinement, the fire shaping your clarity. Descartes would interpret this as returning to reason, not cold logic, but the kind that restores order within chaos. To think clearly again, to understand the causes of your inner turmoil, is to regain control over yourself. And with that clarity, you can rebuild not from ambition, but from truth. You don't need to design a perfect future. You need to align with a meaningful one. The Stoics often spoke of living in accordance with nature, which, in modern language, means to live in harmony with your authentic self. When you stop betraying what you feel in order to maintain what you have, peace returns. Purpose isn't about constant movement. It's about right movement, motion that honors your values. It's no longer about doing more, but doing what matters. Joe Dispenza reminds us that transformation begins when emotion meets intention. Every time you act with conscious purpose, you rewire your brain's associations. You replace the old stress loops with new patterns of gratitude, curiosity, and focus. Neuroplasticity becomes not just science, but spiritual truth, proof that renewal is always possible. And so you begin to rebuild, not from urgency, but from alignment. You wake with a different kind of energy, not born of pressure, but of clarity. You no longer rush to fill the silence. You use it as a compass. You start trusting that every small step made in truth is worth more than 1,000 made in fear. Purpose returns not as a command, but as a conversation between your soul and your actions. And as you listen to it, you realize you never truly lost your way. You just stopped walking toward yourself. rewiring your brain for inner calm. The rediscovery of purpose opens a door, but to walk through it, you must learn to think differently. You can't rebuild your life with the same mental architecture that once led to burnout. This is where the true transformation begins, not through external change, but through internal reprogramming. It's the art of teaching your brain to serve peace instead of pressure. Andrew Huberman often says that your brain is plastic, adaptable, sculpted by repetition and attention. Every thought you entertain and every emotion you reinforce leaves a trace, a physical change in the neural pathways that shape who you are. For years, you wired your mind for survival, adrenaline, urgency, comparison, control. Now, it's time to rewire it for clarity, calm, and coherence. The process begins with awareness, but it's sustained by repetition. The same way stress became a habit, peace must become one too. Joe Dispenza describes this transformation as firing and wiring new circuits. When you consciously choose thoughts aligned with gratitude, focus, and meaning, you create new neural maps that override old conditioning. The body, once addicted to stress hormones, learns to exist without them. Your chemistry shifts, dopamine becomes balanced, serotonin stabilizes, cortisol decreases. What you once thought was anxiety was often just chemistry misaligned with purpose. But this rewiring isn't passive. It demands participation. It means choosing how to respond instead of reacting automatically. It means slowing down your thoughts until you can see them clearly. Descartes would call this methodic awareness, the deliberate practice of separating truth from assumption. Through mindfulness, breathwork, and conscious reflection, you start to interrupt the old thought loops. You stop being at the mercy of your emotions and begin to guide them like a skilled navigator. Neuroscience shows that calm isn't the absence of activity, it's the synchronization of it. When your brain waves shift from chaotic beta frequencies to balanced alpha and theta states, your body and mind finally communicate in harmony. You feel grounded, yet alert, present, yet expansive. This is the state of flow, the meeting point between discipline and peace, where effort feels natural and time feels fluid. Marcus Aurelius would recognize this as the essence of Stoic practice, mastery over the inner world. He trained his thoughts daily, reminding himself that perception is everything. Likewise, modern CBT techniques echo this truth. What you think consistently, you become neurologically. Reprogramming isn't mystical, it's practical. Every moment of mindfulness, every pause before reaction, every deep breath before speaking. These are the building blocks of a calmer brain. You begin to notice the shift not as a sudden enlightenment, but as subtle strength. You no longer chase calm. You embody it. You wake without dread. You focus without force. You rest without guilt. The same mind that once exhausted you now protects you. And in that balance, you rediscover something most people never experience. A sustainable state of peace, the kind that doesn't fade when life gets hard. Huberman calls this neurochemical balance, but it's also spiritual order. Your mind, body, and purpose finally aligned. This is the new foundation, because once your brain learns that peace is productive, it will never crave chaos again. Strength without strain. True resilience isn't about pushing through pain. It's about understanding it. It's not endurance at any cost. It's intelligent strength, the kind that bends without breaking. For years, you were taught that resilience meant persistence, that real strength was to keep going no matter what. But what if resilience isn't resistance at all? What if it's the art of alignment, knowing when to act, when to pause, and when to surrender without defeat? Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence reveals that the foundation of resilience isn't toughness but regulation, the ability to remain calm in the storm without suppressing what you feel. You stop fighting against reality and start moving with it. Marcus Aurelius practiced this mastery daily, reminding himself that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Resilience, then, isn't force. It's flexibility. It's the capacity to stay centered when everything else tilts. Neuroscience confirms this shift. When you operate from chronic stress, your body releases cortisol in waves that deplete your energy and weaken focus. But when you regulate your breathing, redirect your attention, and train presence, your brain transitions into coherence. The prefrontal cortex reconnects with the limbic system, and your emotions align with logic. Calm becomes strategy. Stillness becomes power. Andrew Huberman explains that resilience grows through controlled exposure, by teaching your nervous system to remain stable in discomfort, not by denying pain, but by witnessing it without collapse. Every moment you choose awareness over reaction, you strengthen the circuits of control and balance. What once triggered you now teaches you. What once drained you now refines you. This is strength without strain, the kind born not from rebellion, but from rhythm. Joe Dispenza calls it self-regulation of energy. You stop leaking your focus into chaos and begin conserving it for creation. You no longer sprint emotionally, you move with precision. This is how you rebuild the nervous system into a state of resilience that feels effortless, not forced. Philosophically, Descartes would describe this as clarity regained through discipline, the order of thought restoring the order of being. When your perception is clear, reality no longer overpowers you. You become the architect of your response, not its prisoner. Resilience, then, is not the absence of pain. It's the presence of wisdom. It's when you realize that peace isn't something you reach after the battle. It's the skill that carries you through it. The Stoics knew it. Modern science proves it. You cannot control the world, but you can master the lens through which you see it. And when you do, you discover the paradox, that the strongest people aren't those who endure the most, but those who know how to rest, recharge, and rise again without resentment. Because real resilience isn't about holding on harder. It's about holding on lighter. When you finally feel alive again, it begins quietly, almost shyly. After years of survival, you feel something unfamiliar stirring inside you, a flicker of curiosity, a pulse of desire, a breath that doesn't hurt. It's not dramatic. It's gentle. You wake up one morning and notice light where there used to be only exhaustion. You remember that life can be more than maintenance. It can be wonder. This is the return of the dream, the resurrection of the part of you that refused to die, even when you forgot it existed. At first, it feels foreign. Joy feels fragile, almost guilty, like an emotion you haven't earned yet. But this hesitancy is part of healing. Andrew Huberman explains that when the brain exits chronic stress, it takes time for the dopamine system to trust safety again. You're relearning how to feel pleasure without fear. It's not regression, it's repair. Each small moment of genuine excitement is a neural victory, proof that your emotional circuits are waking up. This awakening is not just chemical, it's philosophical. Descartes believed that clarity restores existence. Now, that clarity returns, not as thought alone, but as experience. You start to see life again, color, texture, rhythm, all the sensory truths that burnout had dulled. The present moment, once unbearable, becomes a sacred place. For the first time in a long time, you feel time not as pressure, but as presence. Marcus Aurelius would say you've begun to live according to nature again. Not external nature, but your inner one. You no longer chase outcomes, you nurture alignment. Meaning becomes movement. Gratitude becomes your first instinct instead of your last. The fire inside you, once suffocated by noise, burns clean now, steady, quiet, enduring. You no longer need to prove that you're alive. You simply feel alive. Neuroscience calls this neurointegration, when emotional, rational, and sensory networks synchronize. You feel balanced because you are balanced. Your thoughts no longer race ahead of your body. Your body no longer resists your mind. You've become whole. Joe Dispenza describes this as coherence, when heart and brain communicate in harmony, radiating a signal of inner order. It's not abstract, it's physiological peace. This is also the moment where you rediscover imagination. You begin to dream not for escape, but for creation. You start thinking in possibility again. What could I become? Not what do I have to fix? And those thoughts, filled with vision instead of fear, start to rewire your future. The same neuroplasticity that once recorded your exhaustion now records your renewal. Every new image you hold in your mind becomes a signal to your body that life is safe again. The Stoics understood that joy wasn't indulgence, it was evidence of alignment. Seneca wrote, "The greatest joy comes from the consciousness of virtue. In modern words, it means joy is what happens when your soul stops fighting itself. You no longer live against your truth, but through it." So, the dream returns, not as ambition, but as remembrance. You remember who you were before you became what the world demanded. You remember the sound of your own laughter, the texture of calm, the feeling of being guided rather than chasing. And you realize this: your dreams never vanished. They were only waiting for the noise to stop, for the silence to deepen, for you to come home. The fire that never died. Every storm ends in silence, and in that silence, what's real begins to speak. The journey through burnout, exhaustion, and disconnection was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to awaken you. The breaking, the fatigue, the numbness, they were not the end of your story. They were the language your soul used to call you back. Because underneath the ashes of burnout, there was always something that never stopped burning. The fire of awareness, the quiet force of life that refused to give up. Descartes believed that clarity is the essence of existence, that through awareness, we find truth. You've walked through confusion, through the fog of modern chaos, and now you stand clearer, lighter, more real. You've learned that success without presence is emptiness, that control without purpose is prison, and that strength without peace is just another form of struggle. The greatest clarity you can reach is not intellectual. It's emotional, spiritual, embodied. It's knowing that the most powerful version of yourself is the one at peace with uncertainty, anchored in meaning, unafraid of stillness. Neuroscience affirms what philosophy always knew. The brain, like the soul, heals through focus and repetition. Each moment you chose awareness over distraction, breath over panic, truth over denial. You rewired your existence. You taught your mind that peace is not passive, that calm is not surrender, that stillness is strength. Andrew Huberman would say your neural architecture has changed. The circuits of fear no longer dominate. The chemistry of hope has returned. You have literally rebuilt yourself, neuron by neuron, thought by thought. Marcus Aurelius would call this the return to the self, the moment when the outer world loses power because the inner one is finally sovereign. You no longer chase peace. You carry it. You no longer seek validation. You generate it. The same fire that once burned you now lights your way. Joe Dispenza might describe this as coherence, the unity of mind, body, and heart, a biological and spiritual awakening in perfect rhythm. You see now that burnout was never your enemy. It was a mirror, showing you the cost of living disconnected from truth. It stripped away your illusions, your false strength, your endless doing, until all that was left was essence. And essence is where rebirth happens. So as you breathe in this new clarity, remember this: the fire never died. It waited, patient beneath fatigue, faithful beneath confusion. For the moment you'd remember it again. The same fire that once built your dreams will now illuminate your peace. The same energy that once fueled your striving will now sustain your purpose. You're not who you were before the exhaustion. You're something rarer, someone who has touched the edge of emptiness and chosen to fill it with meaning. You've burned away illusion and found light beneath the ashes. And that light, steady, calm, unbreakable, is you.